Thank you, MC, for that wonderful introduction. So I'm Nisal Weerakon. So today, my topic is all about design thinking. Now, have you been in that situation where one person comes towards you and asks, hey, do you know about design thinking? And you go, design what? Have you been in that situation? Or you think and say, hey, design thinking is not for like me, like who's studying right now. It's more like a UI thing, so I don't want to study about that. Raise your hand if you have been in one of those situations. No, no. A confused situation? Yeah, I think everyone is trying to raise their hands. Yeah, thanks for raising your hand. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about design thinking. I'm not going to talk about in-depth things. I'm just going to talk about the fundamentals, where you can learn and apply those things for your projects, for your contest, or the 10 teams who are contesting. So to start off with, first let's check what. Yep. So this would be the agenda for the day. So we are going to talk what is design thinking and the process, and then we are going to do a small activity. So to start off with, what is design thinking? So now I'm going to explain design thinking with 3 questions. Now let's say you have an idea or you have a problem. Just think first, if your idea is creating some value to anyone, or in one word, is it desirable, or desirability is there in your idea. And next think, does it make sense, like business sense? Because if you have a problem, it needs to have a business value, or else you can't sustain that. So you need to think whether it's viable or the viability. And next, you have to think, can it be done? Is it feasible? Now, if you think your problem or the thing what you want to build contain all these 3 things, so it will look something like this. So viability means all about business, desirability, we're talking about being human, and feasibility, technical. So you put all these 3 things together, the common curve where you get one single common thing is the innovation. So if you have all these 3 things, we can call it human-centered design approach, which in other words, we call it design thinking. So are we clear with the basic, what is design thinking? So now we know what design thinking is, so let's go back and check what the history is all about. So based on the history books, so the term user-centered design was coined back in 1986 by this individual called Donald Norman. And this person has a great book. You can see the book right here. The design of everyday things. So if you want to learn more things, you should go and read this book. And in this book, he argues about the good and bad design and the process or the stages of design thinking. And mainly, like these, after he started, it has been proven and practiced, and a lot of people have engaged with this process. And right now, we call it the HCD, or the design thinking. So going on, I might use the HCD and design thinking word. So both means the same thing. And now I talked about the process, right? Like I said, there is a process. So if you go and check the process, so in design thinking, you have three phases. So the first phase is all about inspiration. Second stage is ideation, and the third stage is implementation. Now, you know, when I tell these words, it's a bit confusing, right? Yes? No? Some heads are going up and down, yes. So let's go and check what this is all about. So let's start off with the inspiration part, the first phase. So the first phase, the common questions what individuals get is, how do I get started? And how do I contact an interview? And how do I stay human-centered? Now this is the first phase. So the objective of the first phase is to all about learn things of your problem and the person who is engaged in that problem. So let's say you have a problem. So what do you need to do? How can you do these things? So these are the concerns which comes to your mind when you enter into the first phase. So here are a few things what you can do. So there are so much of ways where you can go into this phase. There are a lot of approaches. So I have listed down a few common approaches. The first one would be the 5 whys. So if I talk about this, let's say you have a problem and you go and talk to your user or the person who is engaged with that problem, and you continuously ask why, until the phase where that individual can't actually give an answer. So basically what we say is 5 whys. Now, when you ask these questions, that question can't be like an open-ended question. It should be specific, and you should be able to get an answer from that. So just go back and learn, search about 5 whys. I think you can learn and you can study that. So the next one is the photo journal. So here, it's all about observing. So what you need to do is you need to tell your user to take a camera or the smartphone and take pictures of the problem. For example, you say your user's problem is entering into a building using a system. Just a crazy example. So you need to tell how this user enter. You need to tell that user to take pictures. So you get all these pictures and you put all those things into a storyboard, and you see why and how this individual is doing the activity, what he is trying to do. How is he actually entering the building? Is he doing something special, or is he waiting something happens? How this process works. So you need to gather pictures, and from that you need to ask questions from your user. And from there only you can learn of the user, learn about the user, and you can move forward. So how many of you are right now confused with the first two things, first two methods, I would say? Everyone understood it? Or, okay, if everyone understood it, can you raise your hands if you got the idea of the first two methods? Yes? Right, superb. So the third one is expert interviews. For example, if I go with the same problem, let's say you have to enter a building and you go and talk to an expert who has been in that situation, who knows the process and what to do and what not to do, and you gather information there. And you think about the problem and move on from there. And you draw it, you do more research, and you all do all those things. Every time what you need to think is what user is doing, what's the objective user trying to achieve. So you gather so much of information in this phase. So the objective of this phase is to gather information and to move on to the next phase. So when you move to the next phase, ideation. So basically here what we want to do is we have information. What should we do with the information? So common 3 questions which comes to any individual who is starting this design thinking process would be, how do I learn things from this and use it? And the next one is, how can I use these ideas to a tangible thing? How can I build a tangible thing? And next question is, how can I build a prototype from this? These are the common questions, because you have a bulk of information and you are wondering, you have a problem, you have information, what do I need to do? How can I move on? So how? Let's move on and see. Here what you need to do is, you have information. You need to do a prototype, and you need to give that prototype to that individual to try it out. And from there you get the feedback, you change your prototype, you give the prototype again. So that's how you do rapid prototyping. So I'm not going to talk too much about prototyping, because the next session will all be about prototyping. And you can ask, how might we? Now this is a method of you listing down small, how can I say, small stories. How might we do this thing? Now, if I take a simple example, in Sri Lanka we have traffic. How might we reduce traffic in Sri Lanka? You can ask that. You can write down in a sticky note and you can put it in the storyboard. But that is too large, right? How can you reduce traffic in Sri Lanka? It's a big, huge problem. So you can't write a big problem into that small story. So when you write how might we, you need to think, how might we solve this in like small steps. So don't think about like, you can't write the example what I told, but you can write how might we cut down traffic by using a generalized bus where you can, all the car users can use that bus where all the car drivers don't need to use their cars, something like that. So it's a simple example. So when you have that idea, don't put that idea like the big idea to that how might we state. Because when you have a how might we with a huge scope, it's hard for you to think beyond that. And the next is journey maps. Always you need to see what's the journey of the user. Where would you start using your application or the product or whatever you want to build, and from there, what would he do? Now, we always think about the happy parts. We say, okay, my system, user would log in and click this button and move on to this page and will go like this and this. But hey, wait. If the user don't do that process, what might happen? User don't log in. User press something else. How are you reacting to that? Do you have proper warnings in your login screen? Are you guiding the user properly? So you need to do a journey map there. So because from that only you can guide the user, because we are talking about human-centered design. So you need to think about all these things when you do something. And obviously you have the storyboards, and in a storyboard you would put all the how might we's part of your journey maps and all those things, and you can build a storyboard for your product. And one key thing what you need to do when you do a lot of these things is you need to brainstorm. Like as an individual you can't do this. You need to brainstorm with the user, you need to brainstorm with your team, and you need to get everyone's feedback, because only based on the feedback and the proper brainstorming only you can move on. Now, how many of you are clear about this phase of design thinking? Clear? No? Yeah, wonderful. So you all are clear. So these are few methods what you can use when you are trying to build your product, I would say. Right, so we have tested feedback right now, so we have a prototype. So what's next? Like, I have done something, so what can I do next? So the next is all about implementation. So when it comes to implementation, common questions what would come to your mind is, how do I make my concept real? You need to find a technology where you can build that solution, and will it actually work? And how can I sustain the problem or the product what you have with you at that point? So these are the common questions what a person would come. So you will ask how. So here are a few methods what you can use at that point. Live prototyping. So in the beginning I said you do a prototype and you give it. So that prototype is not perfect. In live prototyping, what you do is you implement something and you give it to the user and you take the feedback. So you continuously improve your product, but it's a live prototyping, not a rapid prototyping where user can't do anything. So it's somewhat implemented in that. So are we clear about the rapid prototyping and the live prototyping? Yes? Raise a hands? Yeah, wonderful. And here you, at the implementation phase, you think about how it will be an end product and the success part, the revenue and all those things you think about in this phase. So here the objective is in the implementation phase, you get a proper product. I would not say 100% complete, because and when you get feedback, you need to improve, but you get somewhat working product at that point. And I spoke about a lot of methods here, right? Like, you must be wondering, oh, okay, like you see the word here, but how can I learn about these things? So if I'm to talk about each method, it might take hours. So for you, if you are really keen to learn about each method, I would recommend you going to designkit.org and learning about these methods, because each method is mentioned in that website, and you can actually do an activity and you can actually learn. So I will give like time for you guys to write the name. So it's designkit.org. If you want to learn about each phase and each method, that's where you can do it. Now you learn about the method and you know something. But do you have the right mindset to do all those things? Now, obviously, when you start a project, you have a problem or you have a great idea, and you want to do that. But are you willing to change your mindset when you get feedback? Normally, we don't. But in design thinking, what we say is you need to adopt and you need to accept the change, and you need to change if the user is telling that he needs to change. Because always in design thinking, we are talking about thinking about the user and moving on. So that mindset needs to be there in that design thinking as well. And the common key thing, what you really need to do is, you can't do all these things as an individual person. You need to get together, you need to work as a team. You need to get your end user to work with you. You need to ask questions from the end user. You need to interview the end user. You need to give a phone or a camera and tell your end user to go and take pictures of that problem. And you need to build a storyboard, a journey map. You need to do all those things. For that, you need your end user. End user just can't come for a meeting and move on. That will not work. You need to work with your end user, and you need to work with your entire team. It's not just the developers getting together and talking to the end user. It's not the BAs or the consultants just go and talk with the user. You need the full team together, because then only you will see the big picture. Then only each and everyone in the team can contribute to this problem what you're trying to overcome.